Today we're doing a Star Wars Age of Rebellion review for Forged in Battle, a career sourcebook for soldiers. Alright, so we got 4 species, which is a bit out of the ordinary for a career sourcebook. Typically we get 3. 4 species is usually reserved for a era sourcebook or a location sourcebook, that kind of thing. But we got 4, partially because Elam and Elomine, they're closely related. Elam, whatever. They're mole people who lived underground while the Elomine lived above ground. For a while they didn't even know each other existed. Or at least the Elomine didn't know about the Elom until they accidentally sort of mined their way into the underground caverns and tunnels where the Elom hung out. So as underground dwelling mole people, they have digging claws as special ability, where basically they can move underground at a slower rate than normal, but still they can move underground, which is really weird because I don't really expect Star Wars to be that type of universe where it just seems very out of the ordinary, more super heroic or magical in nature, but yeah, whatever. You get to do a cool, interesting thing, which is all you can really ask of a species. More than Elomine, more than the other people get. Mostly experience, that's the benefit. Their starting experience for the Elomine is a bit above average, not the highest in the game, but on the higher side. Also, there's potential to get a bit more bang for your buck as far as experience goes because they get more free skill ranks than you typically get from a species, and so you have a better chance of being able to double up on those free skill ranks. So you get a better chance of saving on some points there. We also have the Kuzo, whatever, a really athletic and physically gifted noble warrior species. They have a special leaping ability where you can leap around. That could come in handy, I guess. I kind of want to pair them with the the Racer and Sentry from the Sentinel sourcebook, which I talked about not too long ago, because they had some extra movement and falling stuff in there. I want to make someone who's just really good at moving around. Hardcore parkour. Nothing else, but they can move around a lot. And the Shista Venom, which are werewolf people, I mean, they're not actually werewolves, they don't transform, but they look like werewolves. They have a really cool thing called Hunter's Instincts, where basically they got like a bloodhound kind of nose. They get to use that in a really interesting way. I have a typo here. You may as well. Basically, if you understand the game at all, you'll understand the typo. Like, it's pretty clear, but if you're new to the game, you might not realize. It says discipline, it should say vigilance. It's initiative related, the smelling, the nose, the hypersenses. It's initiative related, so obviously should not be discipline, should be vigilance. Anyway, moving on. Specializations, we got Heavy, Trailblazer, and Vanguard. Heavy was okay, they specialize in big, heavy weapons, and the really cool, unique thing they bring to the table is the fact that they get talents that help them carry more gear, and also just holding and wielding the more cumbersome weapons, which is kind of neat. But just as a person with a big gun who's good at using that big gun, really, I think the Ace Gunner just does it a little better, and I said that in the larger review. All 3 of these got a larger guide and review in their own separate video if you want to check those out. Trailblazer, definitely liked a bit better. I think my favorite of the 3. They're a ranged damage dealer, kind of a Rambo type. They can make a snare to trap people. They got some buffs or protective buffs. They deal with cover, ordering people in cover. Got some offensive capabilities. All around pretty decent tree. Vanguard is more of a tank, a better bodyguard than an actual bodyguard than bodyguard. If you're familiar with the hired guns, bodyguard tree, and you can tank, protect people, but not as much as I nearly would have liked. Vanguard is what I wanted that tree to be, basically, and it's a pretty solid tree. Sort of the tip of the spear, close quarters, kind of a fighter and tanker. All in all, a pretty decent set of species and trees. So, signature abilities. The bigger they are. If you remember, the Engineer sourcebook had a harder they fall. They're kind of similar in a way. Anyway, basically it's a giant debuff to really big, heavily armored targets, vehicles mostly. You pick a target, it's debuffed, and you do some more damage as a group. Unmatched Courage makes you into a super hard to kill badass of destruction. Mostly a lot of defensive buffs to you. You can add new ones through upgrades or just make it easier to do in the first place, as with most signature abilities, easier to activate in the first place. Also, you can add a bit of a damage buff eventually, which is nice. You can make yourself more destructive while taking all the damage. Let's see, equipment. We have a lot of offensive weaponry. 10 new energy weapons, 8 of which are at least long range. Some of them even go up to extreme, which is nice. And we also have some projectile weapons, a grenade launcher, a shaped thermal grenade, slug thrower pistol, some other stuff. A few melee weapons, some cool armor. Mostly you come here for the giant energy cannons, which they have quite a bit of. Decent amount of equipment across the board. We even have medical equipment, which, running theme. One of these things I cannot get rid of is the Colonist sourcebook, which the Colonist has the Doctor talent tree, had like no medical equipment whatsoever. They had some medical rules, but no medical equipment. And there are plenty of other sourcebooks which have more medical equipment than the Colonist sourcebook, which is for doctors and other stuff too. But still, Doctor was part of it. Medic is a part of this, and medics were a better healer than doctors for the most part, and they have more equipment in here, which is... The Fringer sucks, Bodyguard's not a bodyguard, and there's not enough medic stuff in the Colonist sourcebook. Those are 3 things I will never let go with this game. Anyway, we got a fair amount of vehicles, mostly in terms of planetary, like atmospheric warfare, air speeders, tanks, lots of cool ground vehicles there. The Clone Wars Walker and Attack of the Clones, they're statted in here. We also have the gunship from that era as well. A bunch of other more atmospheric ground level vehicle combat. If that's going to be a big aspect to your campaign, this book's going to be a big help to you. And what else do we got? A bunch of new rules which are really awesome. First of all, we have 3 charts for fighting in different locations. You know, charts to spend advantages and threats, triumphs, and despairs. 3 different locations are during boarding actions, during urban combat, and during wilderness combat. And so you could set up 3 separate encounters just around each of these individual charts, or you could have these as really as a bread and butter for any type of campaign, really any combat situation. You have a chart for it now, any ground combat situation anyway. Really, this kind of reminds me of the 3 charts we get for space combat and spending those results in space combat with the the Age of Rebellion Ace, that source book. It's that, but for ground, basically. If you like that, well, there's more of it, but for ground. We also have probably my second favorite aspect of the book. I almost forgot the other thing. Can't wait to talk about the other thing, but for now, fortifications. You can build fortifications. We got 3 different types: trenches, bunkers, blinds, all taking a very different type of check, which is kind of awesome. So you can go through an encounter, an adventure, just fortifying defenses, preparing for an attack, multiple players doing different types of defenses in different areas. Let's see, with each one we have the tools needed to build it, occupancy, and the defensive benefits. Each has their own unique defensive benefits, as well as a chart for how to spend those extra results on building these things. Finally, we get to talk about my favorite part of the book, battle scars. Okay, so I love when things happen to you that's permanent. Like in critical injuries in general, there are certain wounds which will just permanently get rid of one of your stats. Or there's one particular wound. One wound will temporarily lower a stat, another will permanently lower a stat. But that's really cool. That could be devastating and awful if it ever actually happened. But still, it's cool that they have a permanent effect on you, that you are permanently affected by something that happens in the game, sort of naturally from it. Battle Scars is a new optional rule I absolutely would love to put into any campaign. This, or hell, Genesis. If you play Genesis, use this as supplements. It's a great system. I love it. Okay, so basically, Battle Scars is a method for a player to buy talents which are normally outside their talent tree. And they are able to do so, purchase these using experience points, at a cheaper cost depending on how severe the critical injury is. So basically, they get a critical injury, the injury heals, they pay X amount of points, and then they can get a talent. And so there are different types of injuries, like in the general sense. Like it could be an impressive scar, it could be head trauma, a close call, or what doesn't kill me. Something happens that just, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, or maybe it makes you more alert or whatever. And for each one, they have a descriptive paragraph giving you a sense of what this kind of injury might be and the effects it kind of has. Also, we have a list of suggested critical injuries by name. So, impressive scar, it could be the discouraging wound or gruesome injury or crippled or something. And then we have a list of suggested talents in the game that sort of match and fit with that theme of your character learning something or being better, having some sort of advantage from this scar, being literal or mental scar or whatever, or just a lesson learned from the experience. So you get an injury, let's say it's the crippled injury, and you find that under the impressive scar heading, and once that heals, the severity will reflect the amount of points you pay for one of the suggested talents in that section. So maybe you get commanding presence. The fact that you have this scar, this literal impressive scar, makes people more likely to follow you. They respect you, or perhaps they're intimidated by you, or maybe the experience just made you more confident. And so you pay X amount of points as suggested by the chart, the severity of the injury, when your critical injury heals, and now you have a new talent you normally couldn't get or would have to buy another tree to get. And also, rounding out the book, we have throughout certain areas which will give suggestions on how to play a soldier. Like, we get some insight into the command structure of the rebellion or militaries in general. You get a sense of what your role might have been, or duties, responsibilities you might have had serving in certain aspects of the Alliance military. If you were in Spec Ops or intelligence or on a ship, just what you would do in general. So that can give you a bit more insight into your character, or just flesh out the Alliance a bit more and command structure and that sort of thing for your GM. But that's basically the book. Okay, so Forged in Battle. Who is this book good for? Well, the best book to compare this to would be the Commander Sourcebook, Lead by Example. That one, it was less of a Commander Sourcebook and more of a mass battle sourcebook, or really a Age of Rebellion, Alliance military theme sourcebook. And it was actually pretty good for that. This book serves that role pretty well as well. The difference being is that this one has a much greater focus on ground combat, almost nothing to do with space in general, whereas Lead by Example, as far as a GM supplement, really worked kind of across the board, had a wide variety of stuff. There was a big emphasis on mass combat and larger encounters, but really any type of military conflict, it worked as a supplement. This is more for atmospheric combat and smaller ground skirmishes and the like. The other big difference between this and Lead by Example is this really works as a soldier sourcebook, whereas Lead by Example didn't really work as a commander sourcebook unless you were a big mass combat guy, which is a new thing that book introduced. This is just a wonderful all-around soldier sourcebook. I can't really think of anything that you would want that it's lacking, and it has a lot of new cool rules that any soldier or most Alliance military people are going to appreciate. Aren't there also trophies? Did I forget the trophies? Yeah, there's trophies. There's stats for trophies. Imperial Officer's Cap, Stormtrooper Helmet, or any other random trophy, intelligence badge. It can give you some bonuses if you find these, which is kind of nice. Just a wide variety of stuff for any military-focused player, especially soldier. It's pretty solid, above average as a career source book for soldiers, while also being a pretty decent ground-focused military GM supplement.